Hello, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022, and this is the Atlanta FileMaker Developers Group. Our presenter today is Jeremy Brown from Integration Magic, and he's going to be presenting on a development environment for working with JavaScript in FileMaker. Jeremy, thanks for volunteering to present tonight. Please take it away.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Glad to be here tonight. As David said, I'm from Integrating Magic, which is my new company. The logo has not been finalized yet. I'm working hard on it, so stay tuned for that. I'm excited about what's coming. I've got some good ideas. Just a word about my company. My company is really all about integrating magic. It's about bringing JavaScript to FileMaker for people. I realize as much as I have been evangelizing it over the years, it's still tough for people to get into for many reasons. One of them is certainly the time it takes to put something together, and of course to learn it. And I know, David, you probably can relate to that. It takes some time to learn this and to get it working. So my company is all about working with people to build them widgets, simply widgets, very little else. Just if people need a calendar or a Gantt chart, or working on a form stack API integration right now for someone, that is what I do, and it's my goal to continue to bring JavaScript to the FileMaker community through number one, building widgets for people, but also for building a community around it. I'll explain that in a little bit. But we have a thriving community going in this JavaScript and FileMaker space. So I'll show that off in just a bit. Tonight, I want to talk about the JavaScript development environment that I have, that I've been working on and use in my business. It's pretty much what runs my entire business model here. It's basically this. It is a set of tools that I can use to build widgets, JavaScript things specifically for people, where I can actually code it in a real code editor and see how it looks and renders and works in FileMaker, both in the web viewer, in a FileMaker layout, and of course using real FileMaker data. So there's this environment is about what I'm going to talk through. It's that set of tools that I mentioned that makes it the easiest possible that we can use, that we have to working in FileMaker. And I'm going to put up there we go. All right, there we go. So I developed this environment because I have been working with Todd Geist a lot in building widgets for people, whether the add-ons or as part of the daily work. And it was always, this was kind of the best thing that we've been able to put together. And so I'm excited to share that. It really solves three problems that are present when we work in FileMaker. Number one, and we work with JavaScript in FileMaker. Number one, it solves the problem of development. How do you develop JavaScript? How do you write it well in FileMaker? What tools do you use? Second one is the rendering of it. How do you see what you're actually working on when you're working on it, and including the bugs that inevitably we put together. And of course, the deploy then. So finally, when we are finished doing the coding of the JavaScript and it works perfectly with our real FileMaker data, how do we deploy it? How do we get it into the FileMaker app that we're using? That is what this is about. And I want to walk through each one of these, and then I'll go through the entire process of building an environment or using the environment for any JavaScript widget needs. So how do I write in JavaScript? Well, this environment suggests actually that we use a code editor, integrated development environment, to do the work. So here above me, I have VS Code, and I am writing JavaScript in that. This is always a hard, one of the hardest problems to solve, and I've been through every single iteration of trying to write JavaScript for FileMaker. When I first started, I was using a text field in FileMaker that did a bunch of substitutions so that that there was a calculation for the web viewer that substituted out some placeholder text for the value in the HTML field, the JavaScript field, the CSS fields, and so forth. And that worked, but it was not the best solution for that. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. Rendering, I need to know what it looks like when I'm rendering it, when I'm writing it. I need to understand if I make this change in the JavaScript, how does that affect what's in the web viewer? And finally, how do I get the code into the app, into the FileMaker app? This question does not answer what is the JavaScript I should learn. It does not answer that. The environment is not about that. The environment assumes that you have some JavaScript knowledge. But to answer this question, which is not the topic for tonight, I've put together some, what I think is a good learning path for FileMaker developers. And I'll show you where this is later. But this is a JavaScript learning path that I have realized all the JavaScript that I do with FileMaker, all the widgets that I build, all the even just plain JavaScript that I'm writing, I use these things a lot. If you notice there's down to right here next to me, it's kind of hard to see, but there are 5 things that we do in FileMaker all the time, and I'm pointing to the JavaScript equivalents of those. So when we perform actions in FileMaker, we write scripts. In JavaScript, we write functions. We are always manipulating data in FileMaker, and in JavaScript, we need to manipulate the data as well. For example, when we do a find using the execute data API script step, we get a found set of records, we pass them into the JavaScript. We do need to manipulate that data most times to make it fit into the data table or the Gantt chart or whatever it is. So this is my answer to what JavaScript should a FileMaker developer learn. It's not what we're going to focus on today, but it is part of that. By the way, if you have any questions, just yell them out or use the chat. I'll pop it open and make sure that I'm seeing it. There we go. Okay, so let's move on to this environment. Develop. How do I write JavaScript? Well, in this environment, the suggestion is to use an integrated development code environment. Specifically, I would recommend using VS Code. VS Code is a pretty powerful program. There is a lot to learn in it, but it's my thought that as FileMaker developers who are engaging in JavaScript, if we all use the same environment, we can help each other out and learn from each other. There's a ton of extensions that FileMaker developers can use. And so if we're all kind of coming up with the best practices in this environment, we have the best possible scenario. A code editor provides a ton of features that we just don't get when we're trying to write JavaScript in a text field. You can see there's some nice formatting, there's nice color coding, and it really works nicely to do some JavaScript here. And I'll demonstrate that when I start to build one. One of the many features of VS Code is being able to type ahead and bring up keywords that I'm using. If I start typing in the fun, I'm going to get the keyword function in JavaScript, and this will work with anything. Variables that I declare, object keys that are present in an object inside somewhere. This is just a very good way to write. It's much more efficient, and it helps us along with our writing. In FileMaker, we can. This environment is all about working with VS Code and working with FileMaker. The script workspace, we all know, is a great place to write things, and we can connect these two using the right there next to my glasses, the perform JavaScript in a web viewer. We'll get into this later, but there's a strong connection right here between what we're doing in VS Code and how we make it happen in FileMaker. Second thing is rendering. How do I see what I'm developing? That's very important. If we're working in a field, if we're writing JavaScript and HTML and CSS in a field, and then the calculation happens to tell the web viewer what to render, we always have to come out of the field, commit the record, and then we see the calculation update, which makes the web viewer update as well. So that's okay, but a VS Code connection to FileMaker, to a FileMaker app, is so much easier and faster. We can simply save the data, save what we're writing over in VS Code, and in some cases, in most cases, it will re-render over in FileMaker right away. So this just saves us a lot of steps in working with JavaScript and seeing what it looks like. Here's an example of that. Right here where the arrows are pointing, I downloaded this library. I wanted to build a form in FileMaker and then submit the data back to a record. And the library that I copied had some placeholder text right there at line 46. And it filled that field in with the placeholder, LOU, loop. Well, that was okay. But then I immediately took it out and I saved it, and without a whole lot of fanfare, the field over there updated with, removing the placeholder text. So this connection is vital to what I think is efficient developing in FileMaker with JavaScript, and it saves us a lot of headache to immediately see what we're working on. The results of what we're working on. Final question or final problem is, how do I deploy the code into the app? Well, this environment is designed for that. I have a little system, again, I'll demonstrate this in a bit, that takes all of the code that is in VS Code, that's part of the module and what we need to render into the web viewer. It compiles it down, it minifies it, it might do some transpiling of it, whatever it does. I don't know what it does, but it takes all of that code and it sends it to FileMaker into a text field. This is my preferred way, where the code from VS Code goes into a FileMaker field that's behind me. But there are alternative ways, and we'll take a look at that as well. But the point is, this environment, because this field, this file, and this code editor are connected, we can deploy this once, 3 times, 100 times. It's really quick, it's really easy, and so that's what this is about. So these 3 problems are solved using this environment, and I'm probably biased, but I'm not sure that with this environment that there's many other problems to deal with left, other than, of course, learning, which isn't the scope and isn't part of this. It's really about providing the best, most efficient way for people to work with FileMaker. When people build APIs, they often start, or API requests, they often start with Postman, get it working in Postman, and bring it over to FileMaker. This is in a similar fashion. We are using external applications, and we are making it, we're doing what we need to do so that we can bring it back into FileMaker. This environment here just happens to be connected, these 2 apps, the FileMaker app and that VS Code repository. So it connects together perfectly. There's a lot of other benefits to this environment that I've listed here. And if you've worked any in JavaScript or repositories, you recognize these. But this is a repository. It follows some Git flow. It's the same procedure every time, and it will hook up into any app, any client app that we might have. Here's the repository. It's on GitHub by Integrating Magic. It's called the JS Dev Environment. And this is set up in GitHub as a template that can be copied from this area, this account to my personal account and used for any number of widgets. Since I've started my business, I've probably built about 20 widgets for people. And I just use this over and over, hitting that green use template button over and over and building a new whole widget based off of the foundation of this repository. What's cool is because it's a repository, everything is included there. You can see next to me, there's some folders. There's actually a FileMaker file right there that comes with it, and the proper scripts and dependencies that are necessary for this to work. So that's really useful. Once it's in my environment, once it's in my personal account of GitHub, I can then use the Git flow to I'm going to go back here. I can use the Git flow to take all of the changes that I've made in VS Code and move them up to GitHub so that they're safe. I can undo changes if I want to, and I'll demonstrate that stuff here if we need to see it. But that's the point of this whole environment. That's one of them here. I mentioned that it's the same procedure every time. It is. It literally takes me 2 minutes to get this set up into a new widget for someone. I just do the procedures and away I go building a widget for somebody. So there's a ton that those are to me a great way to a great reason to use this. I don't have to build this every single time from scratch. I don't have to build the scripts and the folder structure and such. I can just borrow this, move it forward, and get going with it. I mentioned that it's connected to a FileMaker app, and that happens here. It happens a couple places, but when I'm ready to deploy an app, I can use this script file here to tell this environment which file to attach itself to, which file to upload or deploy the code into. So you can see there on lines 3 and 4, I've got some variables that are the server and the file. Right now, this one is connected to the JS dev that comes with this environment, but that can easily be changed with a file name. We can put a server name in there as well because it'll work with hosted files. I typically would simply change the file name and leave the server as the $sign so that it will work with the open file that I'm working on. It makes sense that this would be open. The file would be open when I'm working on it. Finally, there in line 5, I have a script name there that takes this VS Code script here, does a little process where it grabs the build that was made by this development environment, and it causes a script to run that then grabs the code from the build file or folder, it's above me somewhere, and then pushes it into that text field that I showed before. So this is the connection between it. The very few things that we have to think about, I mentioned that this solves a lot of problems, and it does. We still have some considerations to make, to think about when we are working with this. And number one is simply the context of where the web viewer will be right when it's used in real time by people. So this environment can work with any web viewer in your file, but it obviously when it matters where it might matter where the context is, especially if that HTML is in a text field and you want to go get the HTML to load into the web viewer. Got to consider that. Data in, data out, updating the widget. I'll show all those. So here is my development environment. It's on a table. It's on a context right above me. I actually think I changed the name of this, but it's just on its own context. It's a kind of a throwaway JS dev or HTML table that holds everything that this thing needs to run. And so as FileMaker developers, if we put this web viewer on a layout, say a student detail layout that's got a student context and we want to show a table of the students' grades, we would have to build a process that goes to get the web viewer's code in that text field and then loads it into the web viewer. So that's just a small piece of context. Data in and data out is important. FileMaker 19 has given us everything we need to do to get data in and data out. In this instance, I am loading a chart. I'm creating a chart that has some data coming from FileMaker. And we can see that with FileMaker 19, we now can write a function name in a script step in a variable, and eventually we can call that. We can, in line 15 at the bottom there, we can call that function. We can also get some data out of into a variable and pass that in as an argument into the function, and that becomes, the data in. Data out. FileMaker 19 introduced the FileMaker.perform script step or function that we'll call a FileMaker script, in my case, test right there, and it will pass in some data to FileMaker as a script parameter. So that's a consideration. It's just thinking about how is the data going to get in? How is the data going to get out? What I love about this environment is that I can create a configuration for it, and I can update this any old time. Here is a calendar that I was building for a client, and in line, where was that? Oh, line 67 there, it says slot min time. That's a particular option that I can give to the calendars library to generate to start the calendar starts its rendering of hours at 5 a.m. and it ends at 7 p.m. But the client could say, I'd rather it do work hours, or I'd rather it do 12 to 5 or something. I can come in here, I can make a change, redeploy this, and it's good to go in a matter of seconds. So this is a good environment. But the consideration here is that this is my configuration. I don't have to go into scripts. I don't have to go into inline code and try to find out where this option is. I can simply come into my VS Code, my repository, into this file, and I can make the change and redeploy it in a heartbeat. I also like this for configuring setups for different widgets. Here is an example on line 1 and then 21. I've got two objects here that have a different configuration for two different charts. And so again, this is a place that I can configure it. I can use either one of these for any different charts throughout my app. Or I could use both of these configurations for the same, for two different charts in the same web viewer. So this just gives us a lot of flexibility because this is nicely formatted for us. We can read it very easily, and we can store the configuration in here. I've seen a lot of great tools out there, and I've built a couple that expose all of the options of a particular library to the user in FileMaker fields, or maybe, in my opinion, slightly better in a JSON object. And then a developer or someone has to go in there and make some updates to the script step or to the JSON object in order for it to, the changes to be made. That works perfectly. In my opinion, having too much in FileMaker is not the way to go. It's nice to keep it in here because it's kind of out of the way and it's not bothered by people who might not know what's going on. Let's keep on going here. So this environment is, again, I've said it before, to me, it's the easiest way to develop. And I'd love to hear a discussion because I know Blue Feather has done a lot in JavaScript as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, but in all the work that I've done in JavaScript since working with Todd, I have used this method, and I would never go back to writing in a text field. I don't see much advantage in it. I feel like this is so easy for me to work in VS Code. Yes, I've had a lot of experience with VS Code now. I'm still learning every day, but this is a really good place. I used to think that it's a little bit overwhelming. VS Code has a lot of bells and whistles. That's true, but I think together as a JavaScript developer and FileMaker community, we can kind of work together and learn best practices of VS Code. Um, all right, so JavaScript development environment, develop, render, deploy. Curious if you have thoughts about this. I am going to demonstrate this in a bit, but I'm just curious if you have thoughts or comments or questions at this point. We can bring it up.
Sure. So I saw the way you're getting it into FileMaker now to view it as you're developing is you're executing a JavaScript file at the time you want to refresh it. Is that right? And that inserts it into the field, and then you see the new version there?
During deployment, I'm not. I'll show you that in a bit. But the web viewer is actually reading the development server that I've set up in this repository, and I didn't demonstrate that. I haven't demonstrated anything yet, but I'll show you that. Yeah, the web viewer is reading a development URL that the VS Code setup that I have has deployed.
So the script that you wrote for inserting it into the FileMaker database, that's just for building the final product. Is that right?
That's correct. Deploying it to the final product. There's two steps to that. And again, I'll demonstrate those. There's a build step, which does the building inside of VS Code using all the libraries that are behind the scenes. And then there's an upload step. Those two could be run separately. I tend to run them at the same time, but someone could build it and then they could copy all the text and put it somewhere else, like a layout object or insert text script step.
While you're doing the development, then do you have the browser because of your development server that you're running it on your local machine? Does that have an auto refresh that happens, like a live reload type thing?
In most cases, it does. Wow, I'm big here. In most cases, it does. When you're working with this, the web viewer inside of FileMaker on that layout will most of the time auto refresh. Sometimes it doesn't. It kind of depends on how you choose to load the web viewer with the code. So I'll demonstrate that in a bit. But yes, it's on auto refresh. That's what I'm using Parcel behind the scenes to do this development server and auto refresh. And that's what's taking care of it all.
Very cool. I like it. Yeah, we do something similar. We do a lot of like Vue or React. And so we'll use Node and Vite and Webpack and things like that to work in a very similar fashion. Yep. Where as you're making change, we get a web viewer in FileMaker that points to your local dev server. And then as you make your changes in your IDE, then it just automatically refreshes as the changes are happening. So yeah, that's a good way to do it, I think. And Great. IDEs are fantastic. I use IntelliJ, which is the same as like PHP Storm or WebStorm, just because I use IntelliJ just because I use other languages with things too. But PHP Storm or WebStorm will be a little more focused on JavaScript. And yeah, I think those are all critical tools. It just makes it so much easier using an IDE like that rather than typing things. Sublime Text is a less expensive option, although it's not. Well, I guess VS Code is free, but Sublime Text is also nice, I think, as a really basic text editor for things too. That you can install plugins to do things like, have version control integration and things in there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, setting up a development environment, I think, is like half the battle sometimes.
Cool. I'm glad we do similar things. I think I've seen 2 or 3 out there that are similar, and I think I've taken what I learned from Todd and really just stripped it down to the bare minimums for people because it can get a little complicated at times. But it's this one and other ones out there are meeting the needs, and it's good that we have those. I'm happy to walk through mine. I know you have yours pretty well in your head, but I'll walk through mine and we can compare and contrast and see how they're roughly the same or different.
Sure.
All right, we got some time.
I'll tell you one thing that you did too that we did the same thing is have like a build process that minifies, compiles all the JavaScript and inlines everything. So it's in a single file and all the HTML, and it's just one thing you can dump into a text field if you want that to be local. Or
Yeah.
if it's going to get hosted on a server, if you can get it up onto the server and part of your build process too, that's really nice.
Yeah, good. All right, so let's see. How am I going to do this? Because I just realized, nope, I'm going to do it that way. I got to start up OBS because I got to get it into what I'm doing here. Virtual camera. There we go. Like I said, every see if this will work. Okay, good. All right, so we'll continue with you looking at me. I might get out of the way a little bit here and there, but I'm going to walk through this environment and just this is where I'm at with it with people. Start with the environment. I've got FileMaker and VS Code ready to go, and we'll just get it to go. Actually, I need a terminal as well, so I'll get that going. All right, so here's my process. Start with the templates, and in my personal account, I'm going to give it a name. In this case, I'm going to just I'm going to set up an Apex chart widget for myself. Copies it over to my personal account, and I'm doing this because I don't have an internal team. Anybody can use this. It's completely open for people to use. Here it is. It's in my personal account now. It's got everything that was part of the template. I've actually restructured this a little bit since those images were taken, so it looks a little bit different. Go over here, and I copy the URL to clone it. Cloning is the process of bringing it from GitHub and bringing it down onto my local machine. So I'm done with that, and I'll go into my terminal. I always put these in a folder. Users that where all mine go. So JS work. I put it into JS work, and I'll type git clone and paste in the URL. That brings it down, and it puts it into that folder, which is in my documents. There it is. Just a minute ago, half a second ago. So now it's ready there. I'm going to use VS Code to get it into that directory. What was it called? Apex chart widget. And then open it with a little command that I've put together that opens it up in VS Code. Most people will just say, all right, I'm in VS Code. I need to open it. So I'll go to the open. I'll find that folder, and I'll open that repository. All right. So now it's open. This one comes with, there's one script here that does the upload, which I've mentioned. It has a source folder, which contains the JS and the CSS, and then there's a top-level index. Comes with a FileMaker file, and the package JSON is telling it what to work with. In my case, I'm using a library called Open, which runs the scripting to do the build and upload process. And Parcel, I think Parcel is a lot like Vite. I explored that for a while, but went back to Parcel simply because I didn't understand the other one or something. So it was good to do. All right, so I'm going to continue on. Next thing I need to do is install this repository. It is a repository. It is a bunch of code. These packages, these dependencies here in this package file tells it what it's going to use. In this case, behind the scenes. So I'll do an npm install. That creates a new modules folder that contains all the stuff that is going to be used to, make the development server happen so that FileMaker can read the code as I'm doing the development. None of this stuff will be compiled into inline for FileMaker to put into FileMaker, because it's all part of the dev dependencies. Those stick around only here. If I install something like Apex Charts, and I'm going to do that now, and anything that I install that's used actually in the code will be part of it. Will be part of the inline process. So I'm going to install Apex Charts. Go over here, copy their install process, npm install. This is one way to work with the JavaScript library. I prefer this way, but sometimes you could also copy a script tag and put it into your index.html, and it will do the same thing. Here, when I do npm install Apex Charts, make that bigger so we can see it. It will go to the web, get this library, and load it into the node modules folder. So now it's somewhere in here. Apex Charts. Is it? Did I install it? Wait, am I in the right place? Yeah, okay. Oh, it's in here somewhere. I know it is because
the ID might have just not reloaded yet.
Yeah. And because, so now it's there. This will be packaged up eventually when I compile this to FileMaker. All right, so now it's installed, and I'm going to run my start script, npm start, which goes to look at the uses parcel to find the index.html and compiles it into something that the development server can read. Npm start. So now it says that the server is running at localhost 1234, and it created this folder that's not in line right now, but that's okay because the development server doesn't need it to be inlined, but the build process will inline it. Open up the FileMaker file. I've got an extension that runs this in VS Code called Open an Application. That's great. Without this, people would just find that file and open it up. And now these two are connected. So if this FileMaker file is run in development mode, we can see over here, there's a development mode button that the script that's attached to this button just finds HTML in one of two places, either the local host, which is running now, or the HTML table inside the HTML field. So that's what's happening there. And don't need any of this yet, but it just will take that HTML and it will load it in here into the web viewer. I prefer this, but this does come with a couple downsides. I like controlling the load of the web view of the code. But like I said, there's some downsides, and I'll demonstrate that in a bit. But in the very basic, I can come over here to VS Code, and everything that I do over here is immediately rendered, especially when I press Command S. Should be rendered. Why not? I reload it. Let's try that again. Oh, come on. You were just doing this today. So that is kind of a downside to this, in that I'm loading it. And oh, I know why. Duh. I'm adjusting the index.txt. Let's do this. There we go. So if I go into here into the actual index file, there we go. Now it's updating. So at least any HTML changes that I make here, it will say, even if I don't press Command S in VS Code to save the text, it will re-render over here. The only downside to this, and I don't consider it a downside, is that sometimes when I make changes in the JavaScript, well, it is loading. It is loading, but there are some times when I make big changes to like an option of an Apex library or something, and the web viewer just blanks out. I think, I'm not exactly sure why, but I think that if I were to, and maybe you know, David, but if I were to actually put that calculation in here, then the web viewer is always looking at the code, and the web viewer won't clear out if I make big changes to the JavaScript.
Which calculation are you talking about putting in there?
So, sorry. So the one that loads this. So this is the one that loads this. I'm loading the HTML by a script. The script gets the HTML and then it sets the web viewer with that HTML. It actually clears it out first and then it resets it. I'm not sure if this would work. I don't particularly like this because I like it to eventually I like to control everything. I like to control the loading of the web viewer. So I don't typically do this, but
My guess, if you're getting blank pages when you're doing big JavaScript changes, then there's some sort of exception that's happening that's causing the page to fail to reload and load properly and to reinitialize the listener to have it continue reloading after that point.
yeah,
So it could be
okay.
just like a missed semicolon, and then it kind of is breaking the reload behavior.
Yeah, maybe because it's always catching that's a good point. It's always catching the changes that I make. And I do make lots of errors. But I'm not sure if this would I'm not sure
It depends on your library, though. I don't know the little local server that you're using
yeah,
here, how
the
that
part
handles that sort of thing.
I'll have to look and see. I don't particularly find it to be a problem because if I make some changes over here, this blanks out. I just press the load web viewer button, or I can put it on a shortcut and make that happen. Actually, I think I got it on a shortcut, so I could easily put it on a shortcut that runs. Let's just do that. I'm just going to do that. So load web viewer, include in scripts menu. Wow, they really have. So now it's at command 1. So yeah, so I make some changes over here. This blanks out, press command 1, and it will reload that just fine. Great. So now I'm ready to do my development. And I had just installed Apex charts, so I'm going to continue on. I do have some bare bones stuff in here just for the fun of it when people download this, but it's easy enough to clear out the HTML, and I give clear instructions on how to do this so people aren't left.
Oh, there you go. It does handle the errors. That's what I was wondering. Yeah, it did. You just because you had a syntax error in there, and then it gave you a little error dialog
Okay.
that showed that, and then when you fixed it, it reloaded and it continued working. So that's good.
I wonder if it's because it's loaded in here. Yeah. So let's. All right. So it's cleared out. If I'm. Oh yeah. So it's. I'll keep it in here. I do like loading it from scratch, but for now, I guess in development, I can handle that. So this is just basic now working with JavaScript, but this is the whole environment that I've set up. I'll just quickly put in some Apex. Start by
I've got a
importing.
question for you, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get into some of this as you're doing this here. So the FileMaker libraries that get loaded, so that's the screen right there. That's the syntax thing that I was saying that it handled nicely on its own. So that's good.
Yeah.
That's what I thought could potentially have been causing your white screens, but that's not it, clearly. So the FileMaker object that needs to get loaded in here, only gets inserted from the web viewer in FileMaker.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've found a little annoying is that the IDEs don't know about it because it's not actually a package that's been loaded. It's not any JavaScript. It doesn't exist in any of your files. It just kind of gets inserted on the fly.
Yep.
Have you found a good way to get your IDE to recognize that nicely?
You mean as far as like when you start typing it knows?
Yeah, if you're doing auto completing and things like that.
I haven't. That's a good point. I haven't. I'm using the GitHub AI Copilot, whatever it is, and it looks like it's because I've done this so many times. It's actually starting to pick it up. Maybe maybe us FileMaker developers can train the AI to start using it. One option I think is to, and I've seen this happen, is to abstract this out to its own function, and then load that function in and just call that function over and over. So, if you did, you write one function that says const send to FM, and then you did
just build a wrapper around it for something that actually exists, so you don't have to look at the other one the ID is not recognizing. Yeah.
But that's interesting. I wonder if I can. I
mean, you can like force it to ignore things, and there's some workarounds, but And it's not a big deal. It's not like you're calling that many FileMaker scripts that you're typing it that many times in a single widget or application, you know?
Right.
So
Yep.
it's not a big pain, but it would be nice to just have it figure that out nicely.
Okay, so I'm working on my development for my client. They want this chart, add a div to where the chart goes. And there we go. So now it's there. So let's say this is exactly what they want. Yes, the data is here. It's hard coded in. Obviously, I would send it in via the function, which I'll show in a minute. But let's say this is exactly what they want. Out of development mode, the web viewer is going to pull from that. Actually, the web viewer is going to pull from that HTML field, which is right here. So I'm going to simply, I'm going to go back over to VS Code, stop the server, run npm run build upload upload, and it will package up all my code, go over to FileMaker, and the new version of that code is loaded into here, into this text field. So that's just a FileMaker script that has to be part of. This is basically what you would copy into any client file or anything else. This one just needs a couple things to update the window and the place where you're trying to put the HTML. But this is the extent of the script that uploads the file. So now I'm able to go, okay, this is great. Oh, you know what? They wanted a bar chart. So I'm going to go back over here, click save, change the type from line to bar, rerun that command. And now I have a bar chart. So I prefer this method. I like putting the data in a text field, the HTML in text field, but some people may say, I'd rather not do that. I would rather put it in an insert text. So they can go to this index.html in the dist folder, copy all this. And I actually don't know if this will work because I never do this, but let's try it. Insert text. We're going to put it into the HTML field or the HTML variable. And we're going to put in that text.
Nope, I think you had it on the data field. Is that the right one?
Oh, see, this is the problem. Well, this is the HTML. So this is what I don't get. There's a way around this. I don't remember what it is, but in this case, I couldn't put it into an insert text. I could put it, some people like to put code into a text object on the side. I don't know why you would do that, but
seems like a bad idea to me.
It's a very bad idea. But my preferred way, my preferred way is just to use a text field. And this right now, this web viewer is on that context where where that field is, so I don't have any problems there. If this were a calendar, context doesn't matter because I could pull data from anywhere, bring it into the JavaScript, and then you know it renders the data from any number of tables. Where do you put your code when you're developing or done developing?
An HTML field like what you've got, I think works really well a lot of the time because it is compatible with everything.
Yep.
You know, WebDirect requires that has the same origin policy for executing JavaScript.
Yep.
And so if you're going to have it as a separate file, then it has to be loaded on your WebDirect server, which then also makes it available to people and applications outside of your solution. So it's kind of just a widget that's floating out there on your server that could be accessed independently. So if you put it in an HTML field, then that loads up really well. And so what we'll often do is have like a preferences table that's kind of a single file preferences just like system-wide preferences, and
Yep.
then load the HTML in there, and then just have either a really simple relationship or a SQL query that just grabs the value from that field.
Yep. I really messed me up by copying this onto a layout. It's going to take forever. It's not even hosted.
More reason not to do that, right?
Right, there we go. Okay. So yeah, so this is the development environment. This is what I am promoting, evangelizing, talking about with people. And I'm actually, just to wrap this up here, I'm building a community of people that are focused just on JavaScript and FileMaker. We gather here every day to post ideas, to do show and tell, to have different. I actually do office hours every Wednesdays. I got one at 9 o'clock. No one's coming, so maybe I'll just do some work on my own. But this is meant to just promote the idea. We talk about JavaScript and FileMaker only, and I've got I think there's about 90 people in here so far. So please, if you're interested in continuing to spread the word about this, consider this. We don't. There's no talking about which kind of primary keys are the best. It's only about working with JavaScript and FileMaker. So
Is this a Slack channel? It looks like Slack.
this is a circle community
Oh.
that I found and am trying to nurture and grow. I've got some free stuff. I've got some paid stuff here, subscription model stuff that people can go through my trainings and ask for specific one-on-one help with me. I've got links to my documentation that I'm trying to write up about each of these things. The learning path. Whoa, there's nothing in there. The learning path and the development environment. So, yeah. So that is what I've been working on, kind of my life's focus. And like I said, this is how my entire business runs using this. And I'm happy to let people work with this and start building their own widgets and just getting used to this. So yeah, that's why I'm here. So thank you for letting me be part of this tonight.
Thanks for showing all this. This is great. And yeah, I also recommend that everyone uses an IDE, not just text edit. Makes a big difference.
Cool.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing all this. I really enjoyed it, and it's great seeing another developer's tools and techniques for working with JavaScript and FileMaker, because it's just so important these days, I think, to be familiar, to be able to put in widgets like what you're talking about, like the chart that you just inserted in there.
Cool.
It makes a big difference having that skill set.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you, and I look forward to seeing what more you guys do with the JavaScript stuff. You're pretty much using it to build stuff for your clients, right?
Yeah, we get a lot of requests for that kind of thing, for kind of advanced user interfaces or features that FileMaker wouldn't natively support,
Right.
and JavaScript in the web viewer is a great way to do that.
Yep.
I like using JavaScript frameworks like Vue and React also.
Yep.
If you're getting something that's really interactive, I think that's a good way to do it. And then there's Vite, which I think you mentioned at one point also. For if you're using Vue, that's a really lightweight like dev server for that.
So you mind if I ask a question?
Oh yeah, sorry, Zach. Yeah, go ahead.
So between, I guess, the hitting the save key and then the calling of the script to update the web viewer, can you go over what that hook is again? Like, what is actually performing that refresh? Is it
so normally, I apologize. I'm sorry that we were talking so much about things. When the development server is running, the web viewer, if the code is loaded in there, the web viewer will catch every change that you make. Okay. So if I'm in here, let's go back to here. Let's start up the npm start, and let's go back over here. What am I doing wrong?
And this is just your web server doing this, right? Like this isn't, or I guess it depends on you've got different ways of doing it.
So
right?
it's just the web viewer that's actually pulling in the updates. Is that the case?
Yes, because it's
Okay.
listening to
Okay.
this local host. I
Gotcha.
mean, I could click on this, bring it up in my browser right here. And any changes I make, this also will catch. So I'll go back here and change to line, save it, and you can see it kind of replicated in both.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, the reason why I mentioned, and I'm going to demonstrate that here quickly, I'm going to remove this, which I prefer. I prefer that to just be blank, and I prefer to load the web viewer via a script. So if I come in here and I say, this is now a bar, I press Command S, that happens to change it. It's sort of, I actually haven't figured it out when things change. Obviously it's refreshing because you can see the stuff. Maybe it's what you said. If I put a semicolon in or something, I'm not going to get that. Normally, David, what I would get is just a blank screen. The web viewer will type itself out.
I thought that's what it was, but then you did that one time and that error dialog popped up. So that showed me that it hadn't actually disconnected from your server. So yeah, it's something else for sure.
Does that make sense, Zach?
I gotcha.
Okay. So that's all there is to it. And that's why this works, in my opinion, it works the best, because it's exactly what we do in FileMaker. We build stuff, we see how and we're seeing how it works in real time, either if we go into browse mode or just see it in layout mode. But yeah, that's what this is about. So I can develop all day long, and when I'm ready, I can push it. I can make a change and then push it, and it's really simple and easy. We didn't get to the data part, but if we've run out of time, but that's stuff that I cover every week in the office hours, and we talk about in that community. So join us there if you can, and we'll spread more information about this.
Any other questions from anybody else? No. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Jeremy. That was really great. I really enjoyed that. For everyone else who's here, we meet on the first Wednesday of every month. We're doing it all remote now, so it's easy for anybody to join. If you would like to be added to our mailing list, where we send out, the only thing we send out is just the meeting reminders that tell you what the meeting is and when it's going to be, and includes the meeting link. Just send an email to me, david@bluefeathergroup.com, and I'll get you on the list for the notification emails. If you have any ideas for things that you'd like to see, presentations that you'd like to see, topics, or if you have something that you'd like to share, send me an email as well. And we're always looking for meeting ideas and also volunteer presenters, because we always try to get different people in here presenting on different topics. So if you've done anything cool and you want to share it with the group, we just be like, hey, this is a cool technique that I used, a cool solution that I built, something that you think other people would be interested in seeing that makes a great presentation topic, please let me know. And I think that's it.
All right.
Thanks a lot, everyone. We'll see you again next month, first Wednesday of each month at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.